Hello and welcome to the AdTech Heroes podcast. In today's episode, we are going to talk about audio creativity, and I'm delighted to be joined by Steve Dunlop, who's the founder and CEO of A Million Ads. Hi, Steve. How's it going?
Hi, Dal. Good to see you.
Amazing. Really excited to talk about audio. We've not really talked about audio in as much detail up until now. Really excited about this episode to really delve deep into audio advertising. But before we go into that, it'd be great to learn a little bit more about your career and what's brought you to where we are today.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on. And we actually met as part of the very start of my founder journey back in 2015 when I founded A Million Ads. You were one of the first few people I ever pitched this idea to. So thank you for not giving me a face or telling me it was a bad idea, because here we are today.
Exactly. I remember that at the old Spotify office and having a chat, and you know, we'll go into it in a bit more detail, but it just shows how powerful you can be with just simple execution, right? Or working together and partnering up. And making things simple, and especially in the audio space. So, it's great to see what you guys have achieved up until now, and it's what 7.
Maybe I'll start a little bit before that to explain kind of my background and where before that moment when we met in 2015 on Argyle Street. What actually led up to that. I grew up in a house where the radio was always on. My dad would be listening to Radio 1 and my mum would be listening to, Radio 4 or something. And so there was always just noise, always kind of audio on around the house. And that absolutely gave me the bug for communicating through sound and through voice and words and leaving the rest of the imagination. So, you can paint a picture with words and let the brain kind of fill in what the image is. And that can be very, very powerful. And I kind of had the bug for that. I did my local hospital radio as a teenager, and I did some university radio. And then actually when it became time to actually get a job after graduation, I went and worked as a consultant doing kind of business consultancy stuff, but still had this radio bug kind of built into me. And so after 5 or 6 years, I actually quit that job and moved to Manchester and became a radio producer and worked for a rock music radio station called XFM at the time. And was the station producer there, making adverts and jingles for that radio station. And, the job was to come in on a Monday morning and write some scripts and record voiceover and clip it all together and add some music and sound effects. And the challenge at XFM, of course, was the attitude of the radio station was very kind of cheeky. It had this underdog vibe. And so you had to not only write the scripts and record the voiceover, but be funny and actually kind of tell a joke in that 30 seconds of, a promo or an ad or whatever it was that you're writing. So I found that very hard, very, very challenging thing to do, to actually, come up with the concept, then, add this kind of attitude and style to it. We'll come back to that. I'm sure we'll talk about AI and generative AI and synthesized voice and stuff. But that's the human factor, the bit that I was doing there back in the late 2000s. I then went to do various other jobs, but then found myself at Global Radio, which is the UK's largest commercial radio operator, as head of corporate strategy. And the challenge there was how to kind of turn this linear broadcast tanker who have these amazing brands like Capital and LBC and Classic FM, how to make that business fit for the digital age. At the time, Spotify was just emerging, and they'd just moved their headquarters from Stockholm to London, and Snapchat was just coming out, and it was all really the start of the kind of the social revolution. And so the question was, how do those brands and how does that business stay relevant in that world? And that was the kind of the exam question that I was faced with. And one of the things we did was build a way for Global to sell digital audio ad inventory separate to broadcast ad inventory. Previously, the digital services were just simulcasts of the broadcast radio stations. And then we built this ad stack. We got some suppliers and various different, stitched together various different tools to be able to actually insert ads into the digital services independently of the broadcast services. And that's then what became DAX. And you might have heard of DAX in both the UK and the US markets. At the time, whilst we could use all of these now digital ad serving tools, and you could choose, to buy a campaign by audience, and you could do frequency capping, and you could, have all of the kind of the advantages of a digital ad server versus a broadcast system. We actually were just taking the creative that had just played on 95.8 Capital FM. We were just taking that 30-second spot and sticking it out on the iPhone version of the Capital player. And so the creative itself was the same, albeit it might be in a slightly different order and being played to a slightly different audience. And something triggered in my head, like, surely we can do better than this. Broadcast is a one-to-many medium, whereas on digital, it's a one-to-one medium. Each device is talking to each other, as if no one else is there. So you're able to customize, personalize, make dynamic those messages. And took me back to my time at XFM. There were 4 different radio stations within the XFM group. And if, let's say, we were making a promo, Oasis play live at the Manchester Arena this weekend. So that'd be one version, this weekend. And then on Friday, you'd want to say, Oasis play live at the Manchester Arena tomorrow. And then on Saturday, you want to play Oasis play live at the Manchester Arena tonight. So you see you've got that subtle change in the messaging. So there's 3 versions, but times 4 radio stations, because they each had the same sting at the end. That's 12 versions. So back in my day, I had to sit there and make those one by one, 1 through 12. And you bet by the time you got to version 7, you'd realize that there was a little problem. So you had to go all the way back to the start again and re-record all 12 again. And so combining those 2 things, the versioning thought and this DAX thing emerging, literally a little light bulb went off in my head. How do we put these 2 things together? And so I left my role at Global and founded A Million Ads in August 2015 and sat in my bedroom with a laptop for the first 6 months, writing a bit of code and built the first version of that idea. And that's, I think, what I pitched to you at Spotify was this kind of slightly ropey script that played various different versions of an ad based on data about the listener. And that's what the tool is today. It's dynamic creative for audio. So if we know where a listener is or what device they're using or how many times they've heard the ad or what the weather's like where they are, or maybe some data from the advertiser, like if Starbucks is one of our clients in the US, we might know if you're a Starbucks card holder or you have the app installed on your phone. We can take any of those data signals and actually change the voiceover, the music, the sound effects, and build perfect sounding, beautiful audio ads that then get served into digital audio experiences like the Spotify free version or a podcast or Pandora, which is a big music streaming service in the US, or Capital Radio on the global player or on your Sonos. Wherever there's a digital audio advertising experience, we can now personalize and customize and make dynamic that creative.
Brilliant. Totally. And I totally agree with you. And you mentioned AI there, right? So, from making those physical copies and very manual process, how has AI then developed that? And has AI been around in the audio space since you started in 2015? And what have you seen? How has that developed? Because we're thinking of AI, when we talk about AI, it's the buzzword of this year, I would say, right? Or kind of the
Sure.
last part of last year. So like you said, it might not be necessarily new. So it'd be good to see how you started off by using AI. Did you have to partner up with certain companies and or build your own tech? And then how that's developed over the years. It'd be good to understand.
Sure. I think we probably split it into 3 different things. AI is a very broad term. The first one, as we'd look at it, would be voice synthesis. So the ability for a computer to read out some text and make it sound like a human voice. The second one would be machine learning tools to provide support, help to a user to get their job done quicker. And then the third would be generative AI, where actually ideas, scripts, writing is generated by an AI. So I'll approach each one of those individually. Voice synthesis. So, ever since the day, BBC Micros back in like 1980s, hello, I am BBC Micro, computers have been talking to us. And iteratively over time, those voices have got better and better. When I started the business in 2015, Amazon's Polly voice, which was the very first Echo voice, had just come out. And it was very clearly a computer. It sounded like a computer voice. It didn't get intonation right. It would say names incorrectly. And I remember saying, people would ask me, is voice synthesis going to change your business? And I'd say, yeah, probably in the next 1 to 2 years, these voices are going to get much better. And I'd been saying that really until the beginning of this year. In fact, it was November last year. I was still saying these voices are good, but they're not good enough. And then 11 Labs came out with their new voices, which now have been, the models that they use and the techniques that they've used have now been copied by everyone. So everyone's voices are now really good. And they did 3 things. The first thing was increased the audio quality. A lot of the models for voice synthesis were trained on hours and hours and hours of speech. And often that meant it was just for pure file size. It meant that the quality of the audio wasn't very good. It's quite hissy or quite compressed. Or, sometimes when you listen to a podcast that's been recorded over a Zoom call or something, you can just hear that it's not a full dynamic range. That's now changed. Second thing is they added breaths. So actually, as these languages, these synthesizers are reading out sentences, they're now adding breaths and pauses and sibilants that a normal person's mouth would do as they're speaking. So that just really tricks our brain into thinking that this is a real voice. And the third thing they did was run every sentence, every paragraph that we write into these synthesizers. They run them through a large language model to get an intent, to get a meaning and understanding, so that their first go at reading is already going to have a good shot at what is the emotional kind of component of the sentence that I'm trying to read. So when you combine all those things together, the voices that you get today are really good. And then the other side of voice synthesis is the training. And now the amount of audio that's needed to train the next voice has vastly reduced. If you want low quality, you can do it in like 30 seconds. If you want a good, if you're Samuel L. Jackson and you want to use his synthesized voice, he will have sat there and trained an AI model for hours, reading very special sentences and all the rest of it. And that will be perfect. But you can get kind of quick and dirty voice models now out of like 30 seconds of example audio. And all of that's down to compute power. All of that's down to, GPUs and which is now the kind of the only real limitation to the speed of growth of AI is compute. So that's number one, is voice synthesis. And today, we still use mainly human voice actors. So we still, when we're writing a script or we're recording for an advertiser, we put a human into a booth and put a nice microphone in front of them and record the lines as we've written them, and record all of the different variants. So, nice sunny day today, nice rainy day today. It's snowy today. Oh, it's cloudy today. Record all of those variants, just the shortest clip that you need to be able to then permute all those variations to make, a million versions of the ad, as our company name goes. But we have started to use voice synthesis. We've now probably done 5 or 6 campaigns out of the 3,000 that we've done that uses some component of voice synthesis, but that's only going to grow. And that's very exciting, because it gives you flexibility. It means that, we're making millions of versions of an ad with a human voice actor, but when there's AI involved and voice synthesis involved, actually the human is the list that a human is going to read is no longer finite. It can potentially be infinite. So you could do things like every stock in the stock market and every price that they might be at. That's a very long list if you were to read all of the different permutations out ahead of time. So you'd want voice synthesis to do that kind of thing for you. There's a slight misnomer in the industry that voice synthesis will mean that there's no need for voice actors anymore. And I think for the kind of brands that we work for, we work for Fortune 500, top end of the market, Walmart, Starbucks, Google, Target, Sky, all our big clients. They are not sitting there going, oh, if only I could save the cost of a voiceover. In fact, they're going, I want Idris Elba to be my voiceover, and I want him in vision. I want his association. So actually, voice synthesis doesn't really solve a problem for those kind of advertisers. And it doesn't really save any money, it's because the voice actor cost relative to the overall campaign cost is very small. But for long tail advertisers, where the cost of creative is actually a barrier to entry to starting audio advertising, voice synthesis is very exciting there. So there's a couple of products out in the market. Spotify have been talking about, an extension to their ad studio product and so on. So I'm excited to see how that end of the market develops.
Amazing.
So that was chapter 1, voice synthesis. Chapter 2, of it was using machine learning tools, and we've actually had some ML models in our tool since maybe 2020, long before OpenAI and ChatGPT emerged on the scene, which actually help creative. So we've had a transcription tool that automatically matches audio to lines in the script. We've had an auto expand tool where you say I want to use locations, and it says which country, and it just goes blink and will populate 50 cities, so you don't have to type all that stuff yourself. And what's the third tool we've got? Oh yeah, just auto matching of lines. So just being able to provide little helpers to our users so that when they're using our tool to build dynamic ads, it's as nice an experience as possible. Kind of like, it looks like you're writing a letter, Mr. Clippy in Word, just using the computer, for repetitive tasks and for things that computers understand. So we've been doing that for a long time. And that's only going to extend, again, as models get faster and cheaper and bigger. So then number 3 is then generative AI. We have in-house script writers and audio producers who are writing scripts to advertisers' briefs every day. And now what we are using generative AI in that workflow to really get us from, there's that moment when someone says, oh, have you got any ideas about, I don't know, a new pizza delivery service? And your brain just goes, where to start? And you have this kind of blank sheet of paper syndrome. And it's almost like a leap. You have to somehow start something, you need something, a dot on the paper just to start you thinking. That's where generative AI today is incredibly helpful. You literally just type pizza delivery service and up will come 10 ideas. And sure, there'll be ideas that have been scraped from every other idea that people have had. There's no new idea here. They're just combining and kind of concatenating other sources on the internet that have had ideas about pizza delivery. So we shouldn't kid ourselves that there's kind of new there's brand new ideas here. It's just not. It's just a quicker way of, pulling them all together. But it gets you over that blank sheet of paper problem. So rather than sitting there for an hour scratching your chin going, oh, what should we do here? Within 5 minutes, 5 seconds, you've got something to react to. And then that actually gets you to better ideas for clients faster. So we've been using that since whenever ChatGPT came out, which was end of last year, early this year. And our teams are really seeing benefits. It's getting them to ideas. And then actually, because you then have what you want is more time later down the funnel to perfect and to perform and add all the data and really think hard about, the voiceover and the music and all that stuff. So that it just gets you there quicker. So it's really advantageous. Over time, is the component, imagine a sliding scale. On the left-hand side, you've got a piece of creative that's entirely AI generated. And on the right-hand side, you've got a piece of creative that's entirely human generated. I think at the moment, imagine we're going a little bit towards the left. So we're adding a little bit of AI in there. Over time, that slider might go more towards AI. I think, again, as I said before, about our clients and the kind of demands that they have and what they expect from creative, it's never going to go all the way. There's always going to be intelligent, smart, creative, funny people in that mix to actually really add color, flavor. So we watch the space. I think it will continue to evolve. My worry is that, there are competitors to us emerging who are 100% AI. And unfortunately, I just don't think that their product today it sounds good enough. Our brains can detect that it's a robot voice, and it has this kind of uncanny valley of not feeling very natural. But again, I'm sure that will get better over time.
Yeah, I think
what a long answer to a
no.
I
think it was great because you summarized how AI has been used in those 3 different ways, and we might not look at it or spit it out in that way, right? Because a lot of people just get scared of the word AI and what it involves or what it could involve. But I think you summarized
AI has just been converged with ChatGPT. So when you say AI, everyone's just thinking about ChatGPT, but actually it's a much broader topic.
I think it's definitely a great summary in terms of the role AI has played. But I suppose just touching on your points that it is still important, right, to have that human element and that human touch when it comes to whether it's the copy or even kind of processing the data. You still need those kind of people kind of managing and checking through things. Do you feel that will also change as the AI becomes more sophisticated and the voiceovers become more human-like, or do you still feel there'll always be an element of needing a human involved?
I think from the perspective of the brands we work with, they know what they want to say. Nike isn't going to change Just Do It because an AI told them that they should say, we've got the best sneakers. They know what they want to say. So the where then in the gaps in the delivery from the idea at the top of the funnel through to the delivery of a creative to each individual at the bottom. Sure, there are plenty of places along that supply chain, if you like, where AI could support and assist. And I think today we're just learning, where they could be. I think currently probably the most activity in advertising around AI is around audience selection and delivery. So it's kind of right at the bottom of that funnel. But as I say, I think there'll be points all the way along the supply chain where I think AI can help and will grow its role over time. again, brand by brand, whether they want that or not. I think we are constantly asked about quality, constantly asked about performance, constantly asked about, how can we make sure this is going to do what you say it does? And no one's ready to go, don't worry, the computer said it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So we still have lots of QA, and we still have people listening to all of our adverts and all that kind of stuff. So there's still plenty of room for humans.
In terms of audio advertising, how important is it today for brands, and how is it being used in the media mix? I'm kind of going back to my audio days, kind of 7-8 years ago, and it was just kind of starting off. You started talking to planners. There wasn't really an audio team, so it would go to the programmatic team or the like the digital display team or the video team. So every agency, I think, worked differently, and I'm guessing it's probably still the same. But yeah, how is it? How have you seen it kind of play out now, and what role does it play for these agencies and for the brands?
So very similar in that every agency slightly tackles it differently, but now at least those teams are very much embedded and business as usual rather than emerging as they were back in our day, Dal.
Yeah.
And audio plays a really interesting part in a media mix because it provides a couple of things that other channels can't. The first is you can be listening to something whilst you're doing something else. So radio historically has played very strong being on in the car or being on the kitchen counter while you're having your breakfast or doing your ironing or getting ready for work. And now that we've all migrated to earbuds and AirPods and all of those kind of things, audio can now be with us, through many moments in our lives when other advertising can't reach us. So sitting on a train or commuting or walking to work or, going for a run, all of these places where otherwise, other mediums are quite hard to reach. And then now that we're in headphones, actually, there's an incredibly intimate connection between, effectively you've got someone speaking direct into your brain. You can't hear two things at once. So audio advertising is very clear. It's not like display ads where there might be 50 ads on a page, and if you scroll and one will pop up and, there's expanding ones and closing. Oh my goodness, that's kind of, gives you ad overload. In audio, it's a very clean environment. And, because it's direct into your brain, the messaging tends to stick better. So performance of audio ads is very strong. Plus then, we've had this incredible emergence of a whole load of voice content, which is called podcasting, which, the radio head in me, I used to make the podcast for the breakfast show back in 2007 for XFM Manchester. So podcasting has been in my life for a long time, but really it only really entered everyone else's lives when Serial came out, if you remember. And I think that was 2015, 16 maybe. Yeah. We call it pre-Serial and post-Serial in the podcasting land, but that really put podcasting on the front page of the Financial Times once a week. And then obviously huge investments from all the media groups, but Spotify in particular, spending billions of dollars on both production houses, AdTech around podcasting, content rights, signing up celebs and so on. And that's really put podcasting on the map and created effectively a new advertising format, which in radio we called it the live read, but in podcasting it's called the host read. And it's incredibly effective because, if you're listening to a host that, again, they're in your ear once a day or once a week or once a month, and you feel like the host because they're telling you about all their whys and wherefores. And so when they start talking about Casper mattresses or Blue Apron or Squarespace, you feel it sticks, it pays attention. So podcast advertising is very effective. The challenge is it's very small. So if you're one of our biggest clients is Target, for example, if you're the CMO of Target, your budget is in the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. Spending anything like, even $5 million in podcasting is quite hard to do because it's still very small and very niche. It's growing fast, but that's, what's great about podcasting is it vastly over indexes in terms of attention and effectiveness for actually the amount of money that's being spent on it at the moment. But those two things will rectify. If you remember in the early days of mobile, there was one of these Mary Meeker charts that showed amount of time we're spending with mobile versus the share of advertising budget that's gone to mobile. And now actually fast forward, 15 years? It was the year of the mobile for 5 years, wasn't it? Now fast forward now and it's the year of audio or connected TV or whatever. But there's this disparity here in audio, which is amount of attention and time we're spending with audio versus share of advertising budget. And so that will grow and increase over time. And as has been shown when all new mediums emerge, those two things tend to equal out over time. So there's loads of growth in audio, very exciting space. We actually spend most of our dynamic ads get served into music streaming services or into internet radio services. And podcasting, I'd call it, we're still coming out, we're in this kind of we're in the teenage years, if you like, of podcasting, from, just having baked in host-read ads where literally the person is telling their story about a true crime murder, and then they pick up a piece of paper and start talking about Squarespace. That was kind of the old way of doing it. Now they finish talking about true crime, insert a marker, and an ad will be inserted, but that ad often is post-read or is a kind of one-shot version. And then the transition into kind of, adult podcast advertising will be the full gamut of ad tech that we expect in every other channel now will become available in podcasting as well. And that will include services like ours, like dynamic creative, personalization, proper measurement and attribution, proper onward journey management, and then things we'll talk about, I think, later in the conversation, like being able to interact and respond to the ads. So all of that's coming. I mean, some people are doing it already. The timeline is not everyone does everything all at once. So there's still people doing baked in host reads, but there's now people doing dynamic creative. And then everyone will kind of shift up the S curve, the adoption curve over time. And then the final point about audio is it's, we talked about it being a kind of quite a safe environment, kind of fraud free. You can't hear more than one thing at once, so you can't stack ads. But it's also very brand safe, or mainly a brand safe environment. And what we mean by that is that the content of the podcast or the content of the music that you're listening to tends to be brand safe, or at least easily categorizable so that you can make it brand safe. And within podcasting, a couple of players are emerging that Sounder and Barometer and others who can detect they will transcribe this podcast. They will be listening to our words, and AI will be transcribing our words, and they'll be saying, "Oh, it's a podcast about AdTech." And then an advertiser could choose to insert their ad into the AdTech podcast. And then if this was a monetized podcast, then that ad might get inserted into this content. But if we started talking about current affairs, or if we started to talk about alcohol or gambling or other things, I've now probably messed up this podcast's SEO by even saying those words, then brands and advertisers might choose not to advertise against those topics. And that's an emerging field within podcast content. In music, it's pretty safe because music, it has explicit lyrics or it doesn't. But most advertisers feel comfortable in that environment. In podcasting, there's the whole gamut of content. So now having brand safety around that is emerging and creating again more spaces for brands to spend, and feeling safer to spend more money.
And have you seen certain verticals or certain types of brands invest or lean in more with audio advertising versus others? Are there some sectors that you can think of that are completely just like, no, we don't want to do audio advertising. We'll stick to, your Googles or your Metas or your open web display and video. Yeah, it'd be great to understand.
So I think it's helpful to think of audio advertising slightly in two categories. Where most of the money in digital audio advertising today is in music streaming and internet radio, and most of that the publishers are going after old radio money.
Okay.
So where it's worked well for radio, they're now trying to make that work well for digital streaming as well. So car brands, quick service retail, FMCG brands, and so on. Being traditional radio spenders are now finding value and benefit of migrating to digital audio as well. In podcasting, where it's kind of a brand new world, or was a brand new world, the early adopters were all the kind of D2C guys. So it was the Casper mattresses and the Blue Aprons and Squarespace and so on, which were the kind of direct to consumer, and found podcasting because they're in their kind of makeup of the brand. They wanted to have this personal relationship as part of the brand relationship. So actually using a podcaster as almost like an influencer to connect those two things together was very successful for them. Again, I think that's version one of podcast advertising. For podcast advertising to properly scale, we need to actually pull those two things together so that, the Home Depot, who's advertising on streaming, can feel very comfortable also advertising within a podcasting environment. And actually, maybe using a tool like ours, the creative can be different, because if you're in a music streaming service, you probably want to have a little bit of music under your voice. You may want to have a slightly faster paced voice, maybe a slightly higher energy read. In a podcasting environment, if you've just come from a true crime episode, or you've just come from a I don't know. I just was listening to one this morning about, tech and business news. Maybe you want it to be a dry voice, which, so you don't have any music, or very different type or slower type music. So actually, using a kind of context aware creative delivery means that the same brand can be getting their messages across, but doing it in a way that fits within the environment that it's being listened to.
That's really interesting. We talk a lot about contextual, especially with CTAG being a contextual advertising platform, and we all talk about the death of the cookie. But I never thought of like a voiceover could also be contextual, right? Like you mentioned, for certain genres, the voice that is serving the ad needs to be contextually relevant, and that's super interesting.
For sure, and not just to its environment. So you could think about speed of read, like energy in the voice. You could have a voiceover up like this, or you can have a voiceover down like this, and that could be changed. But also gender of voice, accent. We've done campaigns. I'm not going to remember who the client is now, but we did a campaign in the UK where we had 8 different regional accents. So we had a Scottish accent, a Yorkshire accent, a Welsh accent, and so on. And then depending on where the listener was, we played the accent that we thought would be most appealing to them, most familiar. We've also done, obviously, languages, is an obvious one. So we've done campaigns across, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, and had different languages. And then actually there was a research study that was done a while ago now that said that just simply tested the same messaging, but with a female voice to a female listener, a male voice to a male listener, and then switch over, and which one was more indexed better on the test that they were doing. And it turns out that according to that test, female listeners preferred hearing a female voiceover, and male listeners preferred hearing a male voiceover. So actually, you could imagine that based on the listener themselves, we're changing characteristics of the ad itself.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Whenever we think of audio advertising, we think of branding and more upper funnel kind of KPIs being hit. You mentioned attention, listen through rates we talk about, and these types of things. But have you seen audio also used for more performance-led campaigns?
Yeah, for sure. And more it's being used for that. Actually, some of the most recent campaigns that we've started are now in the performance range. We have a specific product that we call the Audio Circular that's targeted at retailers, that's talking about this week's deals and offers. You go into store today to get 2 for 1 on, Diet Cokes or half off on something. And, sometimes even with an offer code or with a call to action to recoup the voucher or the offer. So that is definitely bottom funnel, store driving, footfall driving. And then if it's depending on the brand, if it's like go to download the app or go to the website or, actually driving outcomes. And then, we're kind of familiar with this in a podcast landscape as well, where you hear, the host say, and to get 10% off, enter This American Life at the checkout. That is a performance campaign. There's no two ways about it. That is driving sales, downloads, or whatever the objective is for the campaign. So no, audio is absolutely moving into. I think the kind of old reputation of it being a branding medium is still true, and still excellent as a branding medium. And again, that's back to the kind of creative and the theater of the mind. And if you want to get people excited about the new BMW, you can just talk about it and have some lovely sounds. And then in my mind, I'm imagining this incredible car. I don't need to send my crew to, some switchback road in Switzerland to film this thing driving. I can just make the sounds. And so, so it's a very effective way for doing branding, because our brain fills in the gaps. But actually, it's also very effective for performance as well. One of the other products that we've worked on for car, autos, is to have, we have a way of knowing how many times each listener has heard the ad. So we can do what we call sequential messaging, where you hear a different version of the ad based on how many times you've heard it. So impression number 1 for this car company, you hear a branding message. It's got wonderful electric windows and drives like a dream. And oh my goodness, it looks great when it's swishing down the road. Message number 2, and actually you can buy it from a dealer near you. They're just around the corner, and we do a location-based call out. And then message number 3, and there's a deal on this weekend. And if you turn up and say, 2 for 1, we'll give you £2,000 up front for your, leasing arrangement. So actually in each of those, for the same campaign, you're covering off 3 different, bases really. And that's worked quite well for because you almost need to land the branding message before any kind of like promotional message is even going to make sense.
Yeah, I think just touching on your point of audio is a great way to tap into the imagination of the end user, which I think with a video asset or a display asset, you're just confined to seeing exactly what you're looking at, right? And taking that information in. But yeah, with audio, it's a lot more immersive. It's a lot more imagination involved. So I think that's really powerful. Have you got any examples?
Yeah, and the fact that your brain's had to work might kind of makes you remember it more as well.
Yeah, it's another great point. And do you have any examples of where you've seen brands really utilize this creativity part when it comes to the audio, the audio copy that they deliver?
Yeah, we've done dynamic songs. We did a campaign for a match brand, Zip Lighters or something, and we got a guy with a guitar to sing a song, and then various different lines in the script based on the weather of the listener would change, or based on the time of day or whatever. So dynamic songs. We've done dynamic rap, where you've got some beat going on in the background, and then rap some lines over the top. We did one for Virgin Atlantic a while ago, where we basically told the listener what we knew about them. So we said, we know that you're in London. We know that it's raining. We know that it's a Wednesday, and we know that it's just about lunchtime. Isn't this a smart advert? But not as smart as the Virgin Atlantic deal. That was the kind of the setup. And people tweeted Virgin Atlantic saying, "This is the freakiest thing I've ever heard. Oh my goodness, how come you know this? I've just thrown my computer out the window. That's so weird." So we were really treading the line between kind of freaking people out. And the feedback we got from the client was, "We've never had that much feedback about a campaign. It's amazing that people are finally interacting." By the way, some of the feedback was, "This is incredibly clever. This is great. This is the future of advertising." Mm-hmm. So actually, it was it was quite fun to they wanted to do that. They wanted to tread that fine line and get that reaction from people. One of the ones we've done recently is with Booking.com in the US, and this campaign is mainly location based, but also time based. So talking about booking a holiday on a Monday morning, or talking about booking a holiday on a Friday night. So you're in different kind of mindsets or different moods at those different times. So your relationship with getting onto Booking.com and booking a holiday is different. So we did that setup based on time first, and then based on your location, which suggest what you might want to do. So travelers in America, particularly at the moment, are traveling less internationally. They're traveling less far. So if you were in Boston, we'd recommend weekend break to New York. If you're in LA, we'd recommend a mountain escape up in the California mountains. So, stuff within like a 1 or 2 hour drive or flight or whatever. So really specific, hitting Booking.com's, campaign objectives. And then it had an offer message that was date bound as well. So if you were within a certain time, you'd hit the offer message, but after a certain period of time, the offer changed. So that had, there were 1.5, maybe 2,000 possible permutations of that ad, and that served across Spotify and iHeart over the summer. And possibly we can insert that in now if we can. It'd be good to.
If you're thinking about swapping your TV for an incredible view this evening, remember, booking is half the fun on Booking.com. Find amazing travel destinations just a few clicks away, like a high-rise hotel in New York City. Vacation at unforgettable properties when you book your next trip on Booking.com, and discover tons of places to stay, from hotels and B&Bs to cabins and vacation rentals. Click here to find your perfect stay. Booking.com. Booking.yeah.
What's next for audio advertising, in your opinion, Steve?
So I think a couple of things we've touched on already. We talked about AI a lot, so I won't go over that again. But actually, audio just being more pervasive in our lives. The AirPods is a really interesting development because you just see people with them in all the time. There's a guy who works in our office who sits at the desk and you go, he'll chat to you, but his AirPods are in all the time. So just more and more of his life, and actually I see more and more people doing this, is connected with audio. And I don't know what he's listening to, but he could be listening to a Spotify stream that we can insert an ad into, or he could be listening to a podcast that has a host read. Or there could be some new format that knows if you're wearing an AirPod and then inserts an ad dynamically based on your situation or your context. So just kind of more wearable audio, and audio that then is much more kind of context aware to you. So rather than, when you walk into a store and there's